Hello everyone and welcome to Babol the Box. I think that's how you pronounce it. Babol the Walking Box is a 3D platformer and it's heavily inspired by Crash Bandicoot. This screen tells us we can play with an Xbox controller. We can, but it definitely does mean only an Xbox controller. You'll see on this screen the UI does recognize my Switch controller as an Xbox controller, but I can't actually use the menu. So even though it's recognizing my controller, it just isn't working, presumably because it's not a real Xbox controller. A Steam controller doesn't work either, and in order to get my controller to work, I have to unplug it and plug it back in, so it registers as a mouse. That's a little frustrating and inconvenient, but at least I can still technically use my controller. We're not going to be saying a lot of nice things about Babol today. I am playing this on a review copy, that's what you're seeing right now. I emailed the dev about some of the issues I encountered, and they said that a patch either has come out or is going to be coming out that they hope will fix them. But as of me recording the footage, it's still a problem. But I can hope it will be better. Anyway, why don't you enjoy the intro cutscene? So the Crash Bandicoot inspiration, already not exactly subtle. Babol here looks like Crash Bandicoot, but transformed into a box. He's got Crash's hair, Crash's color schemes, Crash's sneakers, and Crash's gameplay, which you'll see shortly. The inspiration here is incredibly transparent, and honestly, I don't mind that. If there's something positive I'm going to say about the game, it's how outgoing it seems about what it wants to be. But there are a lot of problems with Babol the Walking Box. One of them being the after we finish this text explaining the exploding crates to us, the camera jitters around a lot. You may or may not have noticed. Personally, I think it's incredibly noticeable the way the camera jitters. At first I thought this was my PC, but the dev seems to have acknowledged it as an issue. Another problem with the game I have is the camera's not nearly close enough to Babol and the hazards you're supposed to be evading. Like, it's kind of difficult to see what's ahead because it's so far in the background. And granted, it's been a while since I've played Crash Bandicoot, but I recall pretty much all of the original styled Crash Bandicoot games give you a really good view of the hazards you were tasked with evading. And they're just so far in the background in this one that it's really difficult to see what's coming for me. So, the camera's jittering a bit, and the camera needs to be closer to Babol and the hazard so you can actually see what you're doing. I don't think that's too unreasonable a criticism. It's just, it would make dodging the hazards a lot easier. Like, judging where I am in relation to these sides, kinda hard. I'm not gonna lie about that. We're gonna die a lot in this game while I'm talking over it. Some of the other YouTube videos I saw about this game, there weren't a lot when I looked, but some of the other YouTube videos called this a rage game. I don't think it's trying to be, is the thing. I don't think this game's intention is to be a rage game. I think it's trying to be a fun Crash Bandicoot-inspired 3D platformer that just happens to frustrate people because of a lot of the design inadequacies in reaching that goal. Our primary ground attack, by the way, is a butt slam, but it's a butt slam without jumping first. It looks really awkward. It's kind of like, you know how Mario ground pounds? It's kind of like Mario's ground pound, but if he didn't have to jump to ground pound first. It looks really awkward. I've never seen a game where the default ground-based melee option was a butt slam without any jumping required. We can also do a butt slam after jumping, but the fact that we can do one without jumping first is what's unsettling to me. It's not, like, broken or anything. The hitbox is understandable, it's just awkward. And the achievement list seems to imply that the intention was for the attack to be a spin. The melee attack was going to be a spin, it seems like, which is a further reference to Crash Bandicoot, I would assume, but for some reason it's a butt bounce. I don't know what happened that the spin couldn't work, but it would definitely look less awkward, I imagine, than a standing butt bounce. And that's just something visual about how Babol controls. There's something about how Babol controls that's not visual and is instead baked into the mechanics that I find troubling. I've gotten around it, but you know how in Crash Bandicoot, when you press a direction, Crash moves in that direction? It doesn't work that way with Babol. Babol has momentum that tries to some degree to mimic like realistic human turning. His turning is gradual, it's not instantaneous like it is in Crash Bandicoot. And since this game is all about reflexive hazard evasion, that's kind of a problem. So some enemies glow purple, and the ones that glow purple are supposed to take 2 hits, but sometimes they glitch out and don't take 2 hits. I'm sure you'll see that later. We've just now reached the first checkpoint, by the way, and that may not seem so bad, but it really is far apart in a game all about hazard evasion where the hazards respawn each time you die and you go back to the checkpoint. The checkpoints are basically in between entire levels. The hitboxes on these exploding potions are weird. The actual explosions of those exploding potions back there don't seem to be what damages you. It seems that only actually getting hit with the potions themselves causes you to die. But, you know, I think it's understandable why someone might consider this frustrating, given what I described about the controls having gradual momentum to them, and the difficulty with the camera not allowing you to see the hazards clearly. It's not a problem during this section, because the camera's close enough to the hazards here, but when it's a stage where you're moving forward toward the background, it's definitely a problem. And also, the lighting has shown up. This lighting, and a lot of the lighting in the game, is really excessive, and right now we're only solving a simple shape puzzle. But when there's lighting this excessive while you have to dodge things, it's a real issue, because it makes it hard to see. Here's the classic run toward the screen section from your Crash Bandicoot games. And actually, there's not a lot wrong with these segments. The bear destroying the objects looks kind of bad. It looks like as soon as the bear runs into an object, he sort of transmutes it into poop. That's not a great graphical effect, but the gameplay of these run from the thing sections, that's fine. It's functional. You may notice what's not fine or functional is Babol's character model. Babol. It's hard to say that. Babol's character model is twitching everywhere, and it's a little distracting to look at. Again, it doesn't affect the gameplay, but it does indicate to me that more polish should have gone into the experience. Oh, and, I mean, we had the red and green crates explained to us, but they do function like Crash Bandicoot crates. The red ones are on a timer after you touch them, and the green ones just explode instantaneously. They're fine, but they are overused as hazards. So I didn't really explain it before, but these shape puzzles, we have to turn the shapes that make up that symbol on the door to the corresponding... You know what? I don't want to explain it. It would take too long to explain, but you'll get to see the solution, so that's got to be good enough. By the way, yes, the lights on these floor switches do look kind of terrible. You can turn on bloom in the options menu to make them brighter, but I don't think that makes them look better, necessarily. So what we've got so far is the camera jitters around a lot sometimes, and sometimes it's perfectly smooth. You'll see it jittering more later. The camera definitely needs to be closer to Babol and the hazards during the sections where you're moving into the background, such as the one we're about to do at night. The nighttime lighting effect is excessive, like most of the lighting effects in atmospheric effects are excessive. It does add a lot of atmosphere, and I won't say it doesn't look pretty, but it does make it harder to see things. So yes, the camera jittering, the fact that the controls are not quick turn, that instead Babol has a sort of slow human-like momentum to him. The fact that the camera isn't close enough to the hazards during these sections in particular, the ones we're doing right now. The graphical issues with Babol's character model sort of twitching. The strange, I don't want to say laziness, but the very awkward choice to make the standard melee a butt bounce that doesn't require a jump before activation. Also, the jumping butt bounce is utterly useless in comparison to the regular on-the-ground butt bounce, so there's that to keep in mind as well. There's minor stuff like the fact that the explosions from those exploding potions, the explosions don't actually hurt you, just only if the potion itself touches you, it seems to be. Which, why would you add the explosion effect with such a clear-looking hitbox then, if that's not actually where the hitbox is? The glowing purple enemies that I'm pretty sure are meant to take 2 hits, but sometimes only take 1, and I don't understand which circumstance decides that. There's also this terrible glitch where, so the way they did the pause menu is, if you pause, the game despawns Babol, and then the pause menu appears, in that order. Presumably it despawns Babol because the game world keeps moving even while you're paused, so they wanted a way to ensure Babol did not take damage while you were paused. I feel like freezing the game world would have been better, especially in a hazard-focused game like this, to ensure that there's not any accidental issues when you unpause that could lead you instantly dying. But even worse, if you spam the pause button, which, granted, I'm not sure why you would, but if you press the pause button 3 times in a row really quickly, for example, it despawns Babol, but the game doesn't pause. So the game becomes unplayable because you can't control Babol anymore. He's not on the screen, he's despawned, you have no character to move, but the game also isn't paused. So that just soft locks you entirely. I will be sure to at least add footage of that at the end of this video. And it is true that I'm not putting my best effort forward in actually playing Babol right now, but Babol doesn't seem to be putting its best effort forward either. The music is also on an incredibly tight loop. It's very repetitive music, and you're going to be hearing it a lot because I think almost everyone will die many, many times in any given level of Babol. I think that's practically a guarantee. This is one of those games where I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't actually get a genuine full playthrough from anyone, but it might be a little too early because the game was just released 2 days ago. It could really shape up, and they do want to launch it on consoles, which, by the way, I think before this launches on console, you might need to polish up, if nothing else, the camera. The camera definitely needs to be closer to Babol and the hazards he's evading, and it should stop jiggling sometimes. I think, like, at a minimum, you should do that before this launches on PS4, PS5, Series X, Xbox One, and Switch. And you know, I don't want Babol to be bad. I feel like I'm being pretty reasonable, and I have constructive criticisms here. I love 3D platformers. I wanted to love Babol. It's just, I feel like there are too many problems, and if it were only 1 or 2 of the problems, it would definitely be fine. It's such a simple game about running down hallways evading hazards, and when the controls and the lighting and the camera placement are all faulty in some fashion, or if not faulty, at least they don't function as they would need to for the design you've created, it's a problem. Because this is all the game is, what you're seeing right here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Simplistic games can be great, and there's nothing inherently wrong with simplicity. I often prefer simplicity. But when you're this simple, you gotta make every element count. To compare this 3D platformer to another indie one that had some problems, I played Felix the Toy a while ago. Felix the Toy is also a very simple game. It's about exploring your environment. You get a single jump, you explore the environment, find keys to progress to the next level, and that's it. Level design is incredibly simple, entirely focused on getting higher from where you currently were, and the camera wasn't great. In fact, in one level there was some sort of strange frame rate issue if the camera was facing a certain direction, which the developer acknowledged and has patched since then. But there was so much else the game did to make up for that problem. Yeah, the camera weirding out sometimes, and the excessive invisible walls in Felix the Toy were sometimes frustrating, but it's a relatively slow-paced game that requires a relatively low amount of skill to complete, and just there's no death state. Everything controls pretty much perfectly. Everything's instantaneous. You can jump as soon as you land. It is free camera movement, so even when it gets stuck, it's possible to get it unstuck. And most importantly, the level design really conveyed what Felix the Toy was going for. Felix the Toy was about capturing the wonder of childhood when everyday environments seem so massive and dreamlike and surreal, like they might if you were a toy. And it's about recapturing that sense of grand spectacle in everyday things. And also climbing higher. Those two things. And the level design is great at conveying that, and the game controls well. Those are the most important things, and the camera glitchiness happens infrequently enough that it's not a serious detriment. With Babol, it feels like everything is conspiring against the game's goal to be a fun Crash Bandicoot-like platformer. The game is telling me it would like to be a fun Crash Bandicoot-like platformer, but the lighting obscures the hazards with its excessive, I don't know what you'd call it, it's just excessive in general. The camera, the controls on a fundamental level, everything about it is causing problems with what it wants to be. And I think I'm pretty good at 3D platformers. They're one of my favorite genres. I'm not as good at them as I am beat-em-ups or third-person shooters, but they're up there. It's one of my big three. I don't think the kind of challenge Babol is presenting is coming from a genuine place. I think it's coming from an unintended place. But I think we've had just about enough of this nighttime level, so I'm going to skip to when I got a bit further ahead, so we can see what future hazards are in store for Babol, and us by extension. I would love, by the way, if everyone else just unanimously found my criticisms invalid. That would probably be the best outcome to this, is if everybody else but me who plays Babol doesn't have a problem with the things I had a problem with and manages to have an amazing time playing it. I would love that, because why wouldn't I? Just because I think it's bad and I'm not having a good time playing it doesn't mean other people can't or shouldn't. But, you know, I do think the problems I listed here are real problems and not just matters of taste. I don't call things bad lightly or call them flaws lightly. I feel like most things people considered flaws are usually matters of taste, so I try to avoid that. I suppose another thing I just thought of that I might count as something I genuinely enjoy about the game, which doesn't make it good, mind you. Liking something and it being good are separate things, but I do kind of like that we're on a journey just to get a ball back. That's all this is. All of this death, all of this pain, all of this suffering is just to get back a ball that we kicked, and someone's gonna be mad if we don't go get it. So yeah, you're seeing here sometimes the glowing purple enemies take one hit and sometimes they take two. No idea what's going on with that. That seems like such a problem. If the enemy's designed to take two hits, why don't they always take two hits? Oh, Babol. Oh. And you know, it's rough playing Babol after playing some really nice indie 3D platformers lately, like Lorcan the Leprechaun, and Felix the Toy. There's a lot of really creative and cool indie 3D platformers that people don't give any particular attention, and I didn't see why Babol couldn't be the same deal. But as it is right now, it just seems like there are fundamental issues if you're trying to make an enjoyable Crash Bandicoot-like. I thought Wrath of Cortex was fine, by the way, if anyone's curious. Oh, that does remind me. The hazard placement also in this game, it's functional, but it's incredibly bland. The hazards, the way they're placed is just... I feel like it's similar to the Mr. Bean game on the Nintendo Wii. They just sort of placed them everywhere, and sometimes you can just walk around them with no effort. Also, here's a reference to One Piece and Naruto. Naruto with the Rasengan. Luffy doing the Gum Gum Bazooka, I think that is. That might be from the 4Kids version, though. Babol is a bit draining. I have no doubt that I could finish this game if I poured enough time into it, and maybe it gets so exponentially better after the first boss fight and the few levels succeeding that boss fight. That's how far I played. I beat the first boss fight and a few levels after it. So I can't, in good conscience, say the whole game is bad, but a significant amount of it is definitely bad. And maybe it just gets better. Maybe all the problems just stop. Here's Jello Cactus. Jello Cactus is the first boss, and Jello Cactus is a very simple boss. All we have to do is evade his attacks until he is tired, and then we butt pound his head. And yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. I don't think I can say any more about the boss than that. His second phase, you have to time your jumps instead of just jumping wildly. Like, see, he did an attack that I have to time instead of just jumping around in a circle. But for the other two phases, you can just jump around in a circle and the boss basically defeats itself. While we're complaining about things, if you're in a situation where Babol can't move due to a cutscene or some such, and you press jump, the jump sound effect still plays, and you can press jump as rapidly as you want, and it'll play as many times as you want. Just a bit of polish that it would have been nice to look into. Also, when you enter the pause menu, the Babol the Walking Box logo disappears and is replaced with itself. The logo fades out and another version of the same logo of the same size fades in. That's super strange. The reason we're even going after I fight this boss is because there's one hazard I want to show you that's so unbelievably, frustratingly unfair and counterintuitive that I just think there's no defending that one. Most of the things I've described here, I think if you tried hard enough, you could reasonably defend them. But there goes the hat. But this one hazard we're going to counter up here, I don't think there's any defense for it if you even want to call your game a 3D platformer. Alright, so past the excessive lighting effects up here, if I can get far enough, the rabbits have a long smoke trail that's super visible, I assume, so you can even tell there are enemies, because otherwise they blend in pretty well with... Oh, I died. Otherwise the bunnies blend in pretty well with the background. Hopefully what I'm saying about the lighting effects being overwhelming is obvious. They might not be. Maybe that's just my PC or something, but I think they're trouble. I think they're no good. But, you know, maybe PC gaming's weird. Maybe if you play this on a console, you'll think it looks fine. Anyway, up here, this wooden spinning thing, you'd figure we could jump over it, right? Like, when it's spinning, we can jump over it because it's on the ground. That's where its hitbox is. It's on the ground. It's a ground hazard that we should be able to jump over, right? Yeah, I mean, you'd think that. But when we get to the next one, I'll show you. You can't. You can't jump over it while it's spinning. Its hitbox extends in the air above it. That's awful. I cannot defend that. That noise and grunting was me getting done with recording. I'm done recording. I'm done talking about Babol, alright?